Welcome, and thank you for joining Save Ellis Island for this evening's event with Michelle Young, author of Secret Brooklyn. Michelle is the founder of Untapped New York and an author, journalist, and entrepreneur. She is the author of Secret Brooklyn, Secret New York, Hidden Bars and Restaurants, and Broadway, and the forthcoming narrative nonfiction book, The Art Spy, from Harper One, about World War II resistance hero and art historian Rose Valland, which I can't wait to read that. That sounds phenomenal. Thank you, Michelle, for being with us tonight. Copies of Secret Brooklyn can be purchased on Save Ellis Island's website. All proceeds from the book go to the restoration and preservation of Save Ellis Island's South Side. And Michelle and I are going to have a little Q&A. She's going to share some things with us. And then if you have questions, just type them into the chat. And at the end, we will be taking them for the audience to ask Michelle. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's so
Hello,
nice to have
everyone.
you. So you are a graduate of Harvard College in the history of art and architecture, which sounds like something I would have enjoyed studying if I could have done it simultaneously, and a master's degree in urban planning from Columbia University Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. What started your interest in architecture and buildings?
Um, I guess I have to credit my parents, particularly my mom, for taking me all around the world since I was little to see different countries, Europe, Asia, and all over the United States. And I don't think I realized the impact of that until I was in college and decided to stop being an economics major, which I am horribly suited for. And realized that I had loved my art history class in high school. I had taken AP art history. And so when I was having that crisis of what am I supposed to do with my life? What major do I pick my freshman year of college, which they make you do at Harvard? I looked back on what I enjoyed. And so then I did study, I focused on in architecture and took some urban planning classes from the Graduate School of Design while I was at Harvard. And then life takes its way. And after that, I worked in fashion as a merchandiser for many years, went into the business world, and then had another crisis of faith and looked around my apartment and realized that all my books were about historic buildings and preservation and architecture and cities, and realized I needed to dip back into that. So that is the kind of the history of my trajectory until I went to graduate school.
That's great that you followed your passion. So you are the founder of Untapped New York, and that is an organization that we work closely with at Save Ellis Island because you help populate our hard hat tours every week, and you're the founder. So how did Untapped New York start?
Yeah, so back again to my fashion days, every day I woke up and I took the one train from Lower Manhattan and went to Times Square and the fashion district and went to work, and then reverse commute every day. And then when I left the fashion world and did not have a job and was waiting to go to grad school, I started exploring New York. And I realized that when we're working and we're doing the same path, we don't look around. We're just trying to get as efficiently to our destination as possible. But if you have that time and you have that mindset, you can travel New York like a tourist. And so that was sort of the idea. And I would invite my friends to come with me on explorations. So who wants to take the tour of Fresh Kills landfill? That was, I think, maybe our first expedition.
And they kept up with you after that. That's impressive.
Yeah. And that's how it began, in a kind of really crowdsourced way. I put up a website, I called it Untapped New York, and almost immediately people started emailing me saying that they also wanted to write and share and photograph. And that was the origin of the website, which I then, after grad school, had to turn into a company and a business because I realized that that's what I wanted to be doing. And so there's really two phases of it, but it continues to be, I think, in that spirit where people feel that they can share and be excited about their own discoveries with us. And we indeed are always really excited to hear from our readers. And, we don't think we can ever know everything about any city, particularly New York. And We don't pretend that we do, and so we're always on the lookout for interesting new things.
And I'm sure you're always finding them.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about? And I thought a lot about this when I was reading your book, and I've done the Ellis Island tour several times, and so I get, my first time I had my own reaction, and now I see other people's reaction. What do you think it is about hidden or little known places that has such a broad appeal to people? Why does that attract people?
Yeah, I mean, so first, anyone who has not taken the hard hat tour of Ellis Island, that is a huge must, and I highly recommend it. And it is one of my favorite experiences in New York City, and one that I cite a lot when people ask me what should I do in New York, and what is the coolest thing you've done in New York City. And then also, I think the thing about hidden or off limits places is I actually think people want to be able to feel some kind of ownership over their city. And in a big city, sometimes you can feel lost or feel like you don't have control over anything. And anytime I've been in a place like Ellis Island, abandoned hospitals, or had an opportunity to go somewhere that was off limits, I felt um, that had made some mark on the city or had some ownership over the space in a way that was different than the masses. So that's from a more like, I guess, intellectual perspective. But then also, I just feel like people want to know places that other people don't know about, and they want to share that. And we're lucky in New York that there's constantly new places being discovered or places that we forgot about that are being renovated and resuscitated. And so I remember one of the first questions I got early on when I had just put up the website is, but are you going to run out of places to write about? And that has never happened. And that's partially because the city is just the urban fabric is so dense, but also because the people are always creating really interesting new things that are opening that they're working on. And so it's like a endless font of creativity here.
Yeah, it's definitely. I dated a New Yorker for almost 10 years, and I saw so many things because he knew about them. But, if you're walking by the street, like there's a place in Manhattan where it's the sphere from the Superman movies that they
Hmm.
listed as Daily Planet, and that's still out there in New York in a lobby in a building, but as you're rushing by, you don't know. So it's great to
Yeah.
have you to guide us along. And you've written both Brooklyn and Secret New York. And so places like I'm talking about this kind of statue that you wouldn't know about otherwise. How do you find the places for your books? What does your research process look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sort of constantly receiving input from all sorts of sources. So it's reading a lot. It's the emails I get, a lot of press emails, a lot of PR pitches, but you sift through them and there's sometimes really amazing stuff in there. And then the last part, well, one of the other things is like just literally walking around and talking to people. And I'm the kind of person that will open that door, peek down that manhole if there's any opportunity. And so it's a real mix of being out in the city and then reading a lot. And that can be reading can be social media. In the past, I would find a lot of stuff that would pop up here and there and try to, and if it was like someone's project or someone had access to something, then try to highlight those people as well in those stories.
So one of the places that stood out to me in this way of you know blink and you miss it was the Stephen Baltz Memorial, which was dedicated to an 11-year-old boy who survived the collision of two airplanes in 1960. He landed in a pile of snow. Unfortunately, he succumbed to his injuries the next day, and his father took the change out of his pocket and put it in the donation box of this Methodist hospital in Brooklyn. And they took the change out. They put up a plaque memorializing this young man. And the change is part of that plaque. And I mean, how do you find things like that? I mean, unless you're going down that that hallway in that hospital, and being the sort of person that I think both you and I are that stop and read the plaques, I mean, how do you find these places?
I think that particular one must have been in a New York Times article about the plane crash potentially. I have this memory of kind of seeing it printed when you spoke about it. But fun fact, I also gave birth to both my daughters in that hospital, and that chapel is right at the entrance of the main pavilion of New York Presbyterian, now New York Methodist Presbyterian. And my doctor is also there. And so I did take a pilgrimage there during one of my visits to go see it and photograph it and experience that.
Nice. That poor boy.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to talk about some of the places in Secret Brooklyn that I found really interesting. And I tried to kind of, think about what other people would find interesting too.
Mhm.
Because you've got sites that cover every aspect of American history, stories that relate to the American Revolution, to those that relate to organized crime, and everything in between. One of
Mhm.
the ones that really struck me was the Prison Ship Martyrs Monument in Fort Greene Park. It's a monument to the thousands of men and women who died during the American Revolution on prison ships. What is it, and why is it in Brooklyn?
Yeah, and for everyone listening, I will show some photos of all the places we're talking about after in my presentation. So you'll get to see this. So this is a monument inside Fort Greene Park. If you've been there, you will see that there's a large column. And inside the column is actually a memorial and tomb uh, dedicated to the 11,500 approximately men and women who died as prisoners of war during the American Revolution, many of them on prison ships that were anchored in Wallabout Bay off the Brooklyn Navy Yard. They died of overcrowding, contaminated water, very poor conditions, starvation, disease. And they were pretty much just buried along the shore, very haphazardly. And in 1808, the remains were moved and then again moved again. Sorry, they were moved near the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And if any one of you guys know the Brooklyn Naval Cemetery, which it's a memorial site and kind of open space that was designed and built by the Brooklyn Greenway, which I used to be on the board of. Beautiful space. So a lot of the bodies were moved there as well. So, but this memorial inside the park was designed by McKim, Mead and White,
Ah, yes.
famous architects who, and so they were hired to design the entrance to the crypt. And let's see, and what else interesting about it is that President-elect William Howard Taft actually attended the dedication ceremony. So that's it was a big deal, when this was dedicated. And also there are sculptures on it designed by Adolf Weinman, and you guys might know him for designing the Eagles of Penn Station, among many other things.
Wow.
I guess the other thing about it is that the crypt itself is rarely open, but they do open it on occasion, sometimes for open house New York, sometimes for other reasons. So inside you'll see a kind of staircase and a door, and then I'll show you guys later about a plaque.
Well, I got to get that date in my calendar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, then completely different. In Borough Park is home to the Torah Animal World Museum. It is a place where I say taxidermy meets religion, and it's open by appointment. What does that represent?
Yeah, and I will talk about this more when I can show you the photographs. But it is a museum dedicated to all of the animals mentioned in the Torah, and they are in there in taxidermy stuffed form. And it was created by a rabbi named Rabbi Deutsch. And he was dyslexic, and he really believed that if children can touch and feel things, they can learn better. And I believe that's actually how he learned to speak and write multiple languages. And so this museum is attached to another museum called the Living Torah Museum. And so it's a really fascinating place. Rabbi Deutsch is great, and very open and wants to share. And yeah, one of my favorite quirky places in New York City.
Yeah, I have a friend that I need to take there. Um, the Weeksville Heritage Center
Hmm.
also seems like a place more people should know about and visit. Home dates to 1830. It belonged to James Weeks. He was an African American longshoreman, so he was a freed African American who built the home, and he started a community there. It was a community that was also part of the Underground Railroad. What is there for people to learn about in that location? Because I know there's more than just that one house. It's a whole.
Yeah, so there are four houses that you can that are in a row that you can see, and they are landmarked. And they're the only surviving structures that remain from Weeks's larger development. And but they've also built a educational facility, exhibition space, event space, dedicated to Weeksville. And one of the things that I discovered while writing this book, actually visiting another location called the Lot House, is that the Weeksville was actually a stop on the Underground Railroad. So as people migrated north along the Underground Railroad, they would land in South Brooklyn and make their way. They would make a stop at the Lot House and then likely go to Weeksville and then go further north. And that's because Weeksville was a I don't know what's the word, a settlement for free blacks. And so it was a safe place on their journey northwards. It's a beautiful facility, and I think one of the most peaceful places I've been to in New York. I went on like a gorgeous day in the middle of the pandemic, and you'll see the photo there, but it was and nobody was there, and it was just beautiful.
It sounds like a place everyone should make a pilgrimage to. Okay, we're going to go in another different direction. Um,
Mhm.
Harp at Floyd Bennett Field. Floyd Bennett
Yes.
Field was New York's first municipal airport. Pilots like Charles Lindbergh, Amelia Earhart used the airport. Now it's pretty much abandoned, but there is a group of volunteers behind an organization called HARP, Historical Aircraft Restoration Project, and they are using Hangar B for another purpose. Can you tell us about what they're
Yeah.
using Hangar B for?
So I do feel like in the last 15 years, Floyd Bennett Field has become a little more well known, although by nature in South Brooklyn, near really on the shore, it's not a lot of people head out there. But I used to go by it a lot, and some of the hangars have been renovated, and I believe so has like the main control tower structure and building, and they do some film shoots there as well. So you'll see it appear. But this group HARP has been there for at least longer than 15 years, and there's a lot of ex-pilots and airplane enthusiasts, and it's a volunteer program where they restore historic aircrafts. So if you go there, you'll see old C-47 planes, the plane that won the war in the Pacific called the PBY Catalonia. And they welcome anyone to come and join. As far as I knew before, they were open Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. I'd have to double check that now, but um, really a wonderful organization and location.
That sounds like a lot of activity, but you know what? It's almost great that there are these spaces in New York that are open and lend themselves to things like this.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, then much humbler, but one that struck me was the Mosaic House on, is it Borum Hill?
Cobble Hill.
Started with a homeowner who wanted to cover up some peeling paint. And tell us
Yes.
what it's like now.
So her name is Susan Gardner, and the entire house is covered in mosaics, brightly colored pieces of glass. You'll also find tiles, seashells, buttons, blocks, all sorts of beads. Some of them spell out words like celebrate life, celebrate love. She started this in 2001 and then just kept going. She said to us, it was one of those things that seemed to change the tilt of the world. Once I started the mural, I couldn't stop. And I just love that mentality that you can pour yourself into something and then it has a greater meaning for you and likely the people around you. So let me see, what street is that on? Wyckoff Street, 108 Wyckoff Street. So you can go check
And you
that out.
said that even neighborhood children will give her their toys.
Yes, I believe that is it's true.
That's a lot of fun. I love that kind of stuff. Because I studied outsider art when I was in college, is what they
Mhm.
called it. But I was always fascinated by those people that just like started with one little thing and then they have this living, breathing work of art in a building. One of the sites sounds like an old movie. Actually, it is an old movie title. I know for a fact there's an
Yeah.
old movie called Mr. Murder Inc. And so you talk about the headquarters of a group of hitmen associated with Jewish and Italian mafia in the 1930s and 1940s, above a 24-hour candy store and coffee shop. I don't know, the 24-hour candy, I think, kind of like sets off an alarm in my mind.
Seems
Um,
suspicious.
it's a
Yeah,
little
well,
suspicious. So how did this fit in the neighborhood of the day?
this was in Brownsville, which was different than it is today. And Murder Inc. was active in the 1930s and 40s, and you know the names of the big boxes: Lucky Luciano, Bugsy Siegel, Meyer Lansky. They made their money in Prohibition, and then a lot of racketeering, and but Murder Inc. specifically was involved in contract killings, and their favorite weapon of choice was the ice pick. Um, So they are estimated to have carried out between 400 and 1,000 contract killings. And the way it worked was that um, the hitmen would hang out in this coffee shop. It was run by an elderly woman named Rosie Gold. She was in her 60s. And there was a row of telephones in the back. And they would wait until the telephone rang. They would get instructions and they would go and do the deed. Um, and so it's believed that Rosie was in on the take, and but she actually was never convicted of anything. So today
She's just
it's
a
about
nice little lady selling
yeah.
candy. Of course not.
Yeah. And it's still it's a bodega today, so you can stop in.
But are there telephones in the back, or is it now
No,
a wall of chargers?
no, no telephones.
I just love that. And I love that too. The name of it was the Midnight Rose Candy Store.
Yes, that's a
I,
lovely name.
a little odd, but yeah. Um, and then my personal favorite that I read about in the book was the Long Island University basketball court, which is a gymnasium inside a former Paramount theater that opened in 1928. So back when they were building movie theaters that looked like how
Hmm.
we think of Broadway theaters now with, all the elaborate decoration and lighting. But there's a basketball court there. Um, so I feel like when I looked at the picture, I could smell sweaty socks and popcorn at the same time. So
Yeah.
tell us about that
Well,
one.
okay. So this basketball court used to be the Paramount Theater, and there were many theaters in downtown Brooklyn. So around Flatbush and Fulton, they used to call it the Times Square of Brooklyn. And so this was one of those theaters. It has Rococo detail inside, and I'll show a picture later as well. There's a Wurlitzer organ, and incongruously now, it is also a basketball court. And Long Island University bought this theater in 1950, and they use the theater as the court, and then the lobby as a school cafeteria. So it's this very interesting mix of things. The Wurlitzer literally comes out of the basketball court and, can still be played today. But the good news is that they're actually converting this back allegedly into a performance venue, and it's the same group that runs Barclay Center. But that was announced in 2015, and so we'll see when it really opens.
That must have been one heck of a lobby if they put a college cafeteria inside of it.
It was, yeah, it's very long. It looks, it has some like Art Deco feel. I've seen it in television shows as well. Yeah.
You must be fun to watch TV with set in New York because you're like, I know what that is.
Yeah, and I've written our film locations columns for Untapped New York for many years. And unfortunately now, if I watch anything that has New York in it, I can recognize almost everywhere. Sometimes usually they show me like a corner of a street and I'll tell you where it is. It's actually kind of annoying now. I can't enjoy anything that's shot in New York.
Well, and then your brain is like, that wouldn't be their district anyway. What the heck are
Yeah.
they doing there
Yeah,
solving crime?
exactly. Exactly. Wait, they popped out of the station in the wrong borough.
Although it's great that New York's being used again, you know, for locations rather than
Yeah.
fake Hollywood stuff that they tried to do, which was never right to me. That's why I could never get into Seinfeld because it just didn't really feel like New York City to me. I was like, that's not what an apartment looks like. I just couldn't do it. So now Michelle is going to share her slides with us, and she's going to show
Yep.
you photographs of some of the things that she and I have talked about so far, and then some other things that she is has found interesting as well. And I know that you'll find them interesting, and you really have to buy this book because it's so neat. And it's also one of those great books where you can go to like a cocktail party and be like, yeah, did you know? And throw out a fact and impress your friends and relatives.
That's right. Well, thanks. Thanks again for having me. I wanted to give a little backstory on to how this book began and how my explorations began. And I mentioned about my parents. What I didn't mention is that when I was 11 or 12, I was accepted into the Juilliard School of Music. And so I was learning to be a classical cellist. And we drove in from Long Island, where I'm from, and we crossed the Queensboro Bridge, sometimes the Triborough Bridge. And this quote from The Great Gatsby, when I read it, I was like, this is me. The city seen from the Queensboro Bridge is always the city seen for the first time, in its wild promise of all the mystery and the beauty of the world. And so this is sort of, I think, encapsulates my amazement with New York, which has continued until this day. And then more recently, I also love this encapsulation of New York. And this actually comes from a Bloomberg era document called Plan YC, which was Mayor Bloomberg's strategic plans that he would release, his office would release. And I think about this quote a lot, and I think it addresses people who come to New York and are not born here. And again, I'm not a native New Yorker since I'm from Long Island, but I do feel like New York has adopted me. So moving to New York has always been an act of optimism. To come here, you must have faith in a better future and courage to seek it out. And it continues. But to me, this is the immigrant story that Save Ellis Island works to preserve, both in the buildings and in the history. And that to me is also New York. So moving on, I'll show you some of the pictures of the places that Bonnie and I just talked about. So here is the Prison Ship Martyrs Monument. That green door at the bottom is where you enter when they do open it on a rare occasion. Inside, this is what it looks like. There used to be a real staircase, not this metal one that you might be afraid to climb up. There used to be a staircase, and you could go up, and it functioned as an observation deck, and that was all taken out.
I might
And
get
then,
up, but I don't think I'd get down.
yeah. And here is the plaque that I mentioned. In honored glory, 1776. Here rests fallen soldiers.
So are they under the monument?
Yeah, there's a crypt under there. Here is Weeksville. So here is that gorgeous state that I was talking about where like the clouds were perfect. These buildings beautifully restored, the wild grasses that are in the center of this facility. And there's a modern building that anchors the property which you enter through and has that exhibition and research and gathering space. This is HARP at Floyd Bennett Field. So some of the airplanes that have been restored. This is the
And do they
Mosaic
go
House.
somewhere else, the airplanes?
Do they
Or
what?
do they go somewhere else, or do they live in Brooklyn once they've been restored?
That is a good question. I'll have to follow up on
Okay.
that. Mosaic House. So you can see this is just a zoomed in version, actually, but 108 there in mosaics. Really, really unique, very artistic. And this is the Paramount Theater. So you can see the grand proscenium here. The details. Here's the Wurlitzer piano being, sorry, the organ being played, and again, it comes out of the ground. And I will now share some of my favorite places. And there's like 150 places in this book, and it's hard to pick your favorites. So I'm sharing the places that have some I guess deeper meaning or fun story that that came around that make them quite memorable. So this is the Navy Yard Hospital, and in a past life, you could probably describe me as an urban explorer. So I would go into abandoned spaces legally, illegally, but this one I went in legally, and the Navy Yard Hospital Annex encompasses many, many buildings. It was built from 1830 to 1836, and it was active in the Civil War, where it supplied almost a third of the medicine to Union soldiers, and it was also active in both World Wars. Some of the first female nurses and medical students were employed there, and Dr. E.R. Squibb of Bristol Myers Squibb developed the first anesthetic ether for use in surgery there. So it has a lot of history, but this complex has only been accessible on rare occasions and remains abandoned today. The reason I got to go in was actually a photographer did an art exhibition inside. And so we got to see that. There's currently a redevelopment plan in the works as part of Steiner Studios' expansion. It was also announced over a little under a decade ago. It's supposed to open in 2027. I don't know if that date is still accurate, but it would add over 400,000 square feet to Steiner Studio and have an underwater soundstage. So that would be the first of its kind in New York City. And that original redevelopment plan includes renovation and stabilization of existing structures inside the hospital annex. So that is pretty exciting if that comes to fruition. Here are a few more photos. So this was the photographic exhibition, which was a commentary on war by Bettina Witteveen, and this was called We Were Soldiers. So you can see here some of the structures inside. Very beautiful
Very
spaces.
familiar too to us at Save Ellis Island.
Yes, looks very familiar. So next, this place inside the Brooklyn Botanic Garden seems ordinary at first. There's a bronze line that runs across this asphalt walkway. And if you look on the right, there is a rock with a plaque on it. So it's one of those places that, once again, you might just walk by and not even think about it. But actually, this marks the border between the old city of Flatbush and Brooklyn. They were two different cities back then. And you can see on the plaque that's been installed that it says this brass line in the walk shows the boundary between the old city of Brooklyn and the township of Flatbush. Brooklyn, first settled 1636 and Flatbush 1651. And it goes on to talk about the incorporation of Brooklyn and the 5 boroughs into New York City. And so this was a new addition to the book, and I recently published an article about this on Untapped New York, and it went viral. And I think for that very reason that you just wouldn't know about it. And it actually took me a long time to find it. So it is near the Flatbush Avenue entrance in the south side of Brooklyn Botanic Garden, between I think it's the Herb Garden and the Children's Garden. So
Yep, I've
next.
been there, did not know about it.
Exactly. No, I mean, it's very, you would not, I don't think even I would think about it if I walked by it. Just like, oh, here's this brass line. Um, Now this next place is a war museum. And in the course of writing this book, I met many, many fascinating people, all who do their part to make Brooklyn and New York City interesting. And there's a man named Tom Miskell. He is a Park Slope resident and a veteran of the Vietnam War. He serves as the de facto historian for the Park Slope Armory, which was home to the 14th Regiment. If you remember your Civil War history, the 14th Regiment was known as the Red-Legged Devils, and they were dubbed that by Stonewall Jackson at the Battle of Bull Run. This armory is now a YMCA, a women's shelter, and houses this museum inside. Miskell has a particular interest in the lesser-known stories from the wars, such as the service of Black soldiers in World War I and that of female pilots in World War II. One room, as you can see here, is dedicated, actually not this one, sorry. One room is dedicated to the Civil War with models uniform wearing the red pants from the 14th Regiment. And then other rooms are dedicated to other conflicts. So this is obviously more modern conflict. So the museum has its own entry in Secret Brooklyn, but the next location also in the Armory does as well. Oh, here's Tom. Hello, Tom. One of my favorites. So 2 levels below the museum is this shooting gallery. So this was where the regiment would do shooting practice. There is a short range target practice range and a long range one. And so to me, this is just a fabulous Victorian relic, dusty wooden wraparound benches. Those walls must be copper because they have oxidized. And you can see in some of these photos, especially the bottom is one of the shooting ranges, and then you can still see the bullet holes. So bottom right photograph. And trying to think of this. Oh, and they actually they filmed The Godfather in here. There's like a scene in a prison that was filmed here. So it's just really an incredible place. Obviously, again, very silent, abandoned, but I feel aching for some future use. And this is our insiders. I think many of them are on this talk today. Hello. This is one of our first visits as a group. All right, so Torah Animal World, which we talked about earlier. This is kind of my favorite area of it with the lions, but you know, really every animal you can find. And they also did not forget the smallest ones. So not only birds, but insects, lizards, really you name it. And then, so the next door museum, as I mentioned, is called the Living Torah Museum. So similarly, that is showcasing objects and things that are mentioned in the Torah. And it has the distinction of having the world's smallest Torah inside. So this is a photograph of it.
And is that a full Torah?
It is a full Torah. So it was made by a silversmith. It's 2 inches tall, took several years to make. The rolls are sterling silver. The text is 1/32 of an inch high, which was written in Jerusalem on vellum parchment with the help of a magnifying glass. And it was bought at auction for $150,000 and donated to the Living Torah Museum. And this mini Torah is used every week for afternoon prayer during Shabbat, read by someone with 20/20 or better vision.
Absolutely.
So that's a
A
fun artifact.
magnifying glass would need a magnifying glass.
Correct, correct. So this here is the site of the Park Slope plane crash that we talked about earlier. So a little bit of detail on that plane crash. Two planes crashed, they believe, over Staten Island, and one plane made it all the way over here, over Prospect Park, and landed at the intersection of 7th Avenue and Sterling Place. I happen to live on Sterling Place on the other side of the park. And like we talked about, everyone was killed on this in this crash, including some people on the ground, including a caretaker of a church that was at the corner. And that church was a prophetically named Pillar of Fire Church, and is no longer there. And I mean, this story is, of course, incredible. We don't think about plane crashes, except, of course, the World Trade Center, but we don't think of really them occurring right here over New York. But the other fun part of this is I explored this on, I think, the coldest day of the year that year. It was freezing, and we decided to go hit up all the places in Park Slope. And so I'm photographing, these columns and such. And the photo before, actually, the reason I showed it is that you can see this building in the center, and it's missing its cornice. The building next door has the cornice. This one doesn't. And the bricks are a different color. And that's because the plane wing took out that top of that building,
Wow.
and it was later repaired. And there are other elements, like the columns on the bottom right here, show repair. Someone told me that also was from the crash. I don't know if that's true, but the photograph is there. And so on this coldest day of year, I'm taking pictures of these columns, and someone stops me and says, "Do you know what happened here?" And I said, "Yes, there was a plane crash, and I'm taking photos for a book." And he pauses and looks at me, and he says, "Would you like to see the piece de resistance?" And at that point, I decided to blindly follow him into his apartment. It
Always a
turned
safe
out,
bet.
yeah, it turned out he is a sculptor. His name is Steve Keltner, and he lives here. And he had salvaged pieces of the plane, and they're in his backyard and in his apartment. And the grates on his window are from the church, fencing. And he added some detail, since he is a sculptor. So he added details to those and installed them. And he installed them in a time when Park Slope was not so safe. So he explained that to me as well, which is why he has the grates on his windows. But so the photo here is of the plane, and there's like, you can see the gasket, and it's quite moving to see these pieces up close. And as you can imagine, there wasn't really the FAA in the same way there is now. And so these pieces of the plane were in this church courtyard for a long time, at which point he took them.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is the memorial to Stephen Baltz that we talked about earlier, and the coins that were in his pocket. And I love this: "Our tribute to a brave little boy." And if I can find the quote, they were able to interview him before he died. And he said, "I remember looking out of the plane window at the snow below covering the city. It looked like a picture out of a fairy book or fairy tale book. Then all of a sudden there was an explosion. I held onto my seat, and then the plane crashed." Very sad.
It's terribly sad, especially for like I know you mentioned his father in the little write-up, and
Yeah.
I can't imagine like that euphoria of that your son survived, and then not even 24 hours later he's snatched away again. That's just
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. So yeah, I feel like this is a very forgotten disaster in New York. A lot of victims. Um,
And something
and
I mean I can see why you responded to what was in that man's backyard. I mean any of us that lived in
yeah,
the area of New York City remember, pieces of airplanes.
Yeah, yeah. And there is a memorial. It's in Greenwood Cemetery. This was put up by, I believe, United Airlines after the accident. And speaking of Greenwood, another
Ah,
favorite entry of mine is the Brooklyn Parrots. If you look very closely at the spire, you'll see some nests. And this is at the entrance of Greenwood Cemetery. Spectacular, magnificent entrance, by the way. Here's a
very Gothic.
close-up. And here are the monk parrots of Brooklyn. And monk parrots are not native to Brooklyn by any means, but they have taken roost here and survived for decades. And so in the 1970s, the Argentinian government launched a bounty program, and because there were too many of these parrots. So they would compensate farmers for killing the parrots, shooting them. And they counted them that if they sent in the legs, they would then pay them. This became ripe for cheating and corruption, as you can imagine. People were sending in like chicken feet, and so they stopped that. And so Argentina decided, oh wait, maybe a better idea is to export these parrots. People in other countries seem to love them. They keep them as pets. And so they started exporting them to the United States and other countries. And as the story goes, a crate was opened at JFK Airport and a bunch escaped. It's also possible that people had them as pets and let them go. So there's a lot of different stories of how they may have gotten here, but one story is about corruption at JFK and at the ports, and that they would allow people to open up every so often some of the crates and take what was inside, and out came the parrots. But the fun thing about this is there is a man in Brooklyn named Stephen Baldwin, and he gives tours of the monk parrots. I don't think I have another photo here, but you walk. So they're in Greenwood, but they're also in Flatbush. So you can see them in a field in Brooklyn College, on the streets of Flatbush, among Victorian Flatbush. You'll see nests, and he'll take you around. So his website is called
So
brooklynparrots.com.
they've never gone further afield than Brooklyn, though, these
No,
parrots?
they've gone to like New Jersey and Long Island, but there's a
Oh, okay.
real
Concentration.
agglomeration here. Yeah, concentration. And Stephen calls them charismatic megafauna, or species who survive due to their ability to charm humans. And indeed, there's like all the nests in this residential street in Brooklyn, and the neighbors are, making sure they stay there. So, okay. And then another favorite spot is, this is part of the Atlantic Avenue Tunnel. And I think probably everyone has some kind of life regret, and mine is missing the tour of the Atlantic Avenue Tunnel. I wonder if some people on this talk took that tour with Bob Diamond, but it was the mid-2000s and I was in my mid-20s. I was playing cello, standing up in a rock band in New York City. And well, I was too hungover one morning to go on the tour with Bob. And I thought, no worries, I can take this tour later. He's got tours every month. So the one rule everyone should learn from this talk is, if you are offered tours of an off-limits tunnel underground, you do not miss it. Because those tours were shut down not long after, and I never got to go. And for everyone else who may also have not gotten to go, you can see a portion of this tunnel. And so the reason the Atlantic Avenue Tunnel is famous is because it's considered to be the world's first underground transit tunnel. So this is before the New York subway, before the precursor of the New York subway, before the London tube, whatever. So it was built in 1844, and it connected the Long Island Railroad. It was a remnant of a subterranean portion of the Long Island Railroad that ran from New York to Boston. And this tunnel was placed below ground to prevent deadly street accidents between pedestrians and the trains. That was happening a lot in New York City. And the tunnel was sealed off in 1861 because steam locomotives could no longer run in Brooklyn. Bob Diamond, who passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago, he convinced what was then the Brooklyn Union Gas Company to give him access. And he started excavating himself by hand. And he excavated this entire tunnel. So this is the entrance, and here is the tunnel. He
What did he
excavated,
use to, I'm sorry, what did he use to excavate it?
I mean, when the pictures I've seen were shovels, but maybe
I'm
he
like
had some other
picturing a
tools.
Shawshank thing here, you know?
Yeah, I mean, maybe he had some other tools, but uh and so he discovered this tunnel between a dirt and concrete wall. And he fought for 30 years or more, actually, more than that, to revive this tunnel, turn it into maybe a trolley museum or something like that. And he also believed that there is an 1836 locomotive hidden behind a wall. And he started scanning that, found through an electromagnetic scan that there is indeed a large metal object behind. He was working with National Geographic or one of those companies to do a documentary, but then all sorts of lawsuits happened, halted the progress, and so it's still one of New York City's mysteries. Is there a locomotive back there from the 1830s? So back to this photograph. This is in the basement of a restaurant called Chez Moi on Atlantic Avenue. And it's their speakeasy bar called Le Boudoir. And they too discovered this by accident. They tried to expand their basement level when they were building out the restaurant and discovered this room, which is really kind of underneath the street, actually. And it's the former coal room of the train line. And so I don't know if you can see in this photo because I've got images on top, but there is a hole and then a really nice kind of circular decorative plaque kind of thing. And they would remove that and then coal would be thrown down here. So you can see a remnant of the Atlantic Avenue Tunnel, even if you didn't go on Bob's tour.
And a copy of the Odalisque.
Oh, yes, yes. I don't know how much time I have left, but I'll just talk about maybe one or two other places. This is called the Puppet Lending Library. And I'm not talking about hand puppets. These puppets are like 30, 40, 50 feet. They're the kind of puppets that you see in the Greenwich Village Halloween parade. And so they're for professionals. But professionals need a place to store their 50-foot puppets and lend them out potentially. And so I just love this place. Like, it's so bizarre. It's actually on the second floor of a gym, speaking of another gymnasium, in Brooklyn College. And here are just some more photographs. And it was one of the most difficult places for me to access because, as you can see, it's not really used as a gym. It's a storage facility. um, and Augusta, my husband, who took a lot of the pictures in the photo, finally in the book, I mean, finally gained access. And again, was like, given weird looks, like, why are you here? Like, I believe that's on the right side. That's probably the Brooklyn Bridge puppet. And then you've got what might be, I don't know, Washington, D.C., the Parthenon. I don't know. So
It looks angry, whatever it is.
it's true. Ask and you shall find in here. And then so crazy. And I do want to mention this puppet museum used to be inside the Soldiers and Sailors Arch in Grand Army Plaza. And so I just wanted to show I finally was able to get access in here. And you can see why these puppets could have been stored in this kind of space. And they're currently renovating it. And here I am with the architect of Prospect Park, who's in charge of the renovation here. And this is probably the room in which the puppets were stored. And it used to be a trophy room back in the day. And I should probably end here, but
Yeah,
a
we
great,
do have a few questions. I just have an
yeah,
image of the puppets hanging down the spiral staircase. I mean, that is
yes,
like such a nightmare. Like going up this staircase and there's these puppets.
yeah,
Ooh.
yeah. And so this last one is 58 Joralemon Street in Brooklyn Heights. And once again, if you just walked and didn't look to your left, you wouldn't see anything, you wouldn't notice anything awry, but something is awry here. The windows are all black. And so this townhouse is not a townhouse. It is, in fact, a ventilation facility for the subway. Um, it so and it's been there for decades. The door's a thick black steel, which is another giveaway. The locks are kind of more intense than the normal lock. And so it's a subway ventilator. There are ventilator blades inside. The neighbors have said that every few weeks you might hear a whirling hum and a buzz. But other than that, nothing is strange about it. No weird noises. Every so often, people come in and out, workers, but that's it. And it's rumored that it connects to the 4 or 5 trains below, but obviously, the MTA will not really confirm that.
We will confirm nor deny.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, because I know that the preservationists of the neighborhood are how that happened.
This one is a really good one. I've seen, worse renditions out there, but this obviously was an original townhouse. That's the trick, right? You
Yeah.
can't, if you build another one just like it, sometimes it doesn't quite look, depending on your budget.
So we have a question. I'm originally from Bensonhurst. What have you found there?
Bensonhurst, yes. A new addition is what we call the statue house. And hopefully you guys can Google that, but it is a house that has been decorated all over any space you can imagine with statues of like Marilyn Monroe, Elvis, Betty Boop, Superman coming flying out of the house. Um, and then the garage has been painted, and it says it mimics the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. So I love that place, and that is the creation of someone named Steve Campanella, and he's a retired Marine and just loves pop culture. So definitely stop by there. And not too far. Let me see if there's anything else. There's a Liberty Pole at the New Utrecht Reformed Church. So some like lost history there as well.
We have a question from Donna. As a native Brooklyn transplanted to Durham, North Carolina, I'm very interested in the unknown African American Black experience. I think we talked a little bit about that with Weeksville. Is there anything else
Yeah.
in the book?
Yeah, so I mentioned the Lot House, which is another historic colonial house in South Brooklyn. There is also in downtown Brooklyn, 227 Duffield Street. I think it's in this book. Yeah, it's listed as Abolitionist Place. That whole row of houses had an underground passageway that was believed to be used in the Underground Railroad. And this building and this street came under a lot of controversy as they were building Barclay Center because it was taken by eminent domain. And there was a lawsuit that went up to the Supreme Court, maybe New York Supreme Court, about the taking of this property. And the owner of the house and then her daughter were fighting to preserve it. And so this one building is still there, and they're hoping to turn it into a museum. So there's a whole organization very actively working on that. And last year, the year before, the city honored it and put up and named it Abolitionist Place. And of course, there's Weeksville, and there are many other interesting places in Brooklyn.
Yeah, someone else said that they live 2 blocks from the Lot House. Karen Daly
Right?
says the Brooklyn Paramount had the great rock and roll shows. Emily wanted to know if you can go into the Weeksville homes.
That is a good question. I feel like I have to look that up. I think I've seen that there have been events there. I too would love to see that myself. I haven't been inside.
Okay, I think this question was answered. Does the books have explanations, stories, or just photos? It has
Oh
both.
yeah. I mean, maybe I can kind of show it. No, can't see, it's blurry. But it has like 1 page photo and 1 whole page of text. So more than like a traditional guidebook, it's really a little essay per location.
Donna Frederick says she lived on Sterling Place and saw the fenced off debris, and that Facebook, if you're interested, has a group called Brooklyn, A Brooklynite Forever.
Oh, wow.
Emily says that the parrots moved north from southern Brooklyn over the last 20 years or so. And Klaus Peter
Mhm.
says he took the tunnel tour with Bob and that it was spooky.
Klaus, maybe we would have been on the same tour.
But so that's it. Thank you. You guys had great questions tonight. A lot of audience participation. We appreciate it. Um, so I'm just going to wait for my colleague to put up the closing slide. You there, Karen? Oh no, I did have one last question. You're right. You're right. Um, I wanted to know what's next for you.
Yeah, keeping busy as always. My big project is working on the book, The Art Spy. So this is a narrative nonfiction true story about a French World War II art historian and resistance spy who worked in the museum that was taken over by the Nazis, specifically Hermann Goring's art looting team. So she became an unlikely spy that helped take down that whole organization. They were looting Jewish family art very systematically, stealing over 60,000 works of art, Picasso's, Manet's, to household goods, you know.
I had the honor of meeting um, Herbert Ettlinger,
Mhm.
and he was one of the monuments men.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
incredible story.
So that's what I'm working on the Untapped New York podcast. So I'm not as active in the day to day at Untapped New York, but I am working on the podcast. And I recently launched a literary salon called the Lit Salon. And so we feature award-winning authors on the release of their new book, and it's like a candlelight event in my Brooklyn brownstone. Those are the major projects, and raising my kids.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you've got kids. Well, on behalf of everyone at Save Ellis Island, thank you, Michelle, for participating in this event tonight. It's been a lot of fun. And
Thank you
copies
so
of
much.
Secret Brooklyn are available at Save Ellis Island's web shop, www.saveellisisland.org. Join us for our next event on February 28th as Maria Smilios joins our program. She was recently on Tap New York's podcast, and she
Hmm.
will be with us to talk about her book, The Black Angels, the untold story of the nurses who helped cure tuberculosis. Here at Save Ellis Island, we're also undergoing a membership drive, so we encourage you to visit our website at www.saveellisisland.org to become a member. You'll learn more about the restoration work. You can help us save the national icon. We also have a program going on right now for all donations $35 and above. You will receive a special Ellis Island notepad and pen. And of course, if you haven't done the tour yet, you heard it from Untapped New York herself. That is one of the best tours in New York City. So make sure to come out and take that. Tours are on our website. And also just one other thing, because we're talking about the nurses who helped cure tuberculosis, we'll be having on March 9th a specialized tour led by one of our guides who is a nurse, to talk about the nurse experience at Ellis Island, and information about that is on our website as well. So thank you,
That is an
Michelle.
amazing, yeah, just to plug that, that's an amazing story. And it took place right here on Staten Island. So um, a really untold story, truly.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.